After being forced out of Apple, many believed Steve Jobs' career was over. But Jobs saw his exile as an opportunity, a chance to start fresh and prove himself all over again. In 1985, he founded NeXT, a company dedicated to building cutting-edge computers for education and business. Jobs had grand ambitions for NeXT. He envisioned computers that were not only powerful, but also elegant and intuitive. The NeXT computer, often referred to as the NeXT Cube, debuted on October 12, 1988, at a lavish launch event orchestrated by Steve Jobs. Priced at $6,500, equivalent to over $15,000 today, the computer was marketed as a premium workstation for universities, scientists, and business professionals. It boasted advanced features, including an innovative magneto-optical disk drive, a high-resolution display, and the NeXT operating system, which would later influence macOS. Despite its technological brilliance, the NeXT computer struggled in the market. Its exorbitant price and the lack of compatible software limited its appeal, leading to sales of only 50,000 units over its entire lifespan. The company consistently lost money, burning through much of the $100 million in investment capital that Jobs had raised, including significant funding from billionaire Ross Perot. By the early 1990s, NeXT pivoted to focus solely on software, abandoning its hardware division entirely in 1993. While the NeXT computer was a commercial failure, its operating system laid the groundwork for modern computing, eventually becoming the core of Apple's macOS. Jobs himself later admitted that NeXT was a failure as a business, but invaluable for his personal growth. But Jobs' reinvention wasn't limited to NeXT. In 1986, he purchased a small graphics company called Pixar for $10 million. Initially focused on hardware, Pixar pivoted to animation, producing short films to showcase its technology. Pixar's breakthrough came in 1995 with the release of Toy Story, the world's first fully computer-animated feature film. The movie, directed by John Lasseter, was a critical and commercial success, grossing $373 million worldwide. It also made Jobs a billionaire overnight when Pixar went public later that year. With Pixar's success, Jobs proved he could thrive outside the tech world. He wasn't just a computer visionary, he was now a media mogul. Jobs later reflected on this period of reinvention, saying, "I didn't see it then, but getting fired from Apple was the best thing that ever happened to me. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life." Pixar not only cemented Jobs' reputation as a visionary, but also became the most successful animation studio in history, producing hits films like Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, and Monsters, Incorporated. But while Jobs was redefining animation with Pixar, the company he had co-founded, the very company that once pushed the boundaries of personal computing, Apple, was crumbling. By 1997, Apple was on the verge of bankruptcy. The company was losing money at an alarming rate, with a $1.04 billion loss in fiscal year 1997, the worst in its history. Its market share had plummeted to less than 4%, and its product portfolio was bloated with dozens of underperforming models, creating confusion among customers and stretching the company's resources. To make matters worse, Apple's cash reserves had dropped to just $1.2 billion, barely enough to sustain operations. Apple was in free fall, and it needed a savior. That savior was Steve Jobs. Desperate for a life support, Apple made a bold move. It acquired NeXT Incorporated, the software company founded by Steve Jobs after he was ousted from Apple in 1985. Apple acquired NeXT on February 7, 1997 for $429 million in cash and 1.5 million Apple shares, worth approximately $33 million at the time, totaling roughly $462 million. The deal was negotiated by Apple CEO Gil Amelio and NeXT Steve Jobs. To cover the cost, Apple used part of its dwindling cash reserves and issued shares, essentially betting its future on NeXT technology and Steve Jobs' return. NeXT's operating system, NeXT, was far ahead of its time and exactly what Apple needed to modernize its outdated software. This technology became the foundation for what we now know as macOS and iOS, the software that powers Apple's devices today. But the real turning point wasn't just the software, it was Jobs' return to the company he had co-founded. Initially brought back as an advisor, Jobs quickly took charge, becoming Apple's interim CEO, his self-proclaimed ICEO, in July 1997. From there, he wasted no time shaking things up. Apple's product lineup was a mess, so Jobs made the tough call to eliminate dozens of underperforming products. He simplified the company's focus to just 4 key categories: desktop and laptop computers for both consumers and professionals. This move wasn't just practical, it gave Apple the breathing room to focus on what it did best, building great products. But perhaps one of Jobs' boldest and most surprising moves was striking a deal with Microsoft, Apple's longtime rival. In 1997, Microsoft invested $150 million in Apple, providing a much-needed cash injection and agreeing to continue supporting Microsoft Office on Mac. While controversial at the time, the move gave Apple financial stability and sent a clear message to the market: Apple was not going anywhere. Jobs also understood that innovation and design would define Apple's future. He wanted to make products that weren't just functional, but products people would love. That vision came to life in 1998 with the launch of the iMac. The iMac broke all the rules of computer design. It was bold, colorful, and unlike anything else on the market. But it wasn't just about looks. The iMac was packed with forward-thinking features like USB ports and ditched outdated technologies like floppy drives. The iMac wasn't just a hit, it was a sensation. In its first 6 weeks, 278,000 units were sold, and within 5 months, that number had climbed to over 800,000 units. The iMac didn't just save Apple's finances, it turned out a $309 million profit in 1998 after years of losses. It redefined Apple's image. Suddenly, Apple wasn't just a struggling tech company. It was a brand synonymous with innovation, simplicity, and creativity. By the end of the 1990s, Apple was back on its feet. Jobs had stabilized the company, slashed unnecessary expenses, and launched a product that put Apple back on the map. His ability to focus on what mattered most, combined with his bold decision-making and relentless drive, saved Apple from the brink of bankruptcy. As Jobs once said, "Focus is about saying no. You have to say no to 1,000 things to make sure you don't get on the wrong track." By saying no to distractions and yes to innovation, Jobs turned Apple's darkest hour into the beginning of its greatest era. The return of Steve Jobs didn't just save Apple, it set the stage for the company to become the most valuable brand in the world. With Apple back on its feet, Jobs had done the impossible. He had rescued the company from the brink of collapse. But the challenges weren't over. Just as Apple was regaining momentum, the dot-com bubble burst, sending shockwaves through the tech industry. Companies that had soared during the internet boom collapsed overnight, and $5 trillion in market value was wiped out. The Nasdaq plummeted by nearly 78%, leaving countless firms bankrupt. Apple wasn't immune to the crisis. The company's stock price plummeted, crashing from $36 per share in 2000 to just $7 per share in 2002. Revenue shrank as well, dropping from $7.98 billion in 2000 to $5.4 billion in 2001, reflecting the sharp decline in consumer spending. Tech giants were falling left and right, but Steve Jobs wasn't about to let Apple be one of them. Where others saw a crisis, Jobs saw an opportunity. Instead of retreating, he doubled down, strengthening Apple's core identity and laying the foundation for the company's future dominance. Jobs' strategic foresight and unshakable focus made the difference. While competitors collapsed, Apple managed to stay profitable, reporting $65 million in net income in 2001. This wasn't luck, it was Jobs' calculated leadership. He crafted a survival strategy built on 3 key pillars: cost efficiency, relentless innovation, and brand loyalty. Recognizing the economic uncertainty, Jobs made the tough decision to cut research spending by nearly 20% in 2001. But in true Jobs fashion, he didn't just slash costs, he protected Apple's most transformative projects, ensuring that innovation never stalled. At the same time, Jobs focused on lean inventory management, preventing Apple from overproducing at a time when demand was unpredictable. This meticulous approach gave Apple breathing room, a buffer that many other companies simply didn't have. But what truly set Jobs apart was his refusal to compromise on Apple's identity. Even in a crisis, he remained committed to bold innovation, simplicity, and elegant design. While others scrambled to survive, Jobs was quietly preparing Apple for its greatest era yet. At the height of this economic downturn, Jobs made a bold move. He introduced the iPod in October 2001. Launching a premium product in a struggling economy seemed like a gamble, but for Jobs, innovation never stopped for crises. The iPod wasn't just a music player, it was a statement. 1,000 songs in your pocket, in a sleek, $399 device that would redefine the way people listen to music. At first, critics scoffed at its price and limited compatibility, but Jobs knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just selling hardware, he was building an ecosystem. And he didn't stop there. Jobs expanded Apple's reach by opening the first Apple stores in 2001. At the time, this move was considered risky, as tech companies like Gateway were shutting down retail operations due to declining sales. However, Jobs envisioned the Apple stores not just as retail outlets, but as immersive brand experiences where customers could interact with Apple products and receive expert support. The stores, with their minimalist design, open layouts, and genius bars, quickly became destinations for tech enthusiasts and casual shoppers alike. By the end of 2001, Apple had opened 25 stores, which collectively generated $193 million in revenue in their first year. The retail strategy paid off in the long term, as the stores played a pivotal role in building customer loyalty and boosting sales, eventually becoming some of the most profitable retail locations globally, with sales per square foot far surpassing industry averages. By 2003, Jobs took it further. At a time when piracy was killing the music industry, he launched the iTunes Store, offering a legal, simple way to buy songs for 99 cents. The music industry doubted it would work, but Jobs had an uncanny ability to know what consumers wanted before they did. Within its first year, 25 million songs were sold, solidifying the iPod's dominance. By 2006, Apple had sold over 1 billion songs and 40 million iPods, proving once again that Jobs didn't just create products, he created industries. Then came 2007, the year that changed everything. On the Macworld stage, Jobs introduced the iPhone, a device that combined a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator into one. It was revolutionary. It was magical. And it was pure Steve Jobs. Critics doubted Apple could compete in the mobile market. The $499 price tag raised eyebrows. But Jobs wasn't selling a phone, he was selling an experience. The iPhone's touchscreen interface, seamless integration with iTunes, and the power of iOS made it the gold standard. When it launched on June 29, 2007, Apple sold 270,000 units in 30 hours. By the end of the year, 1.4 million iPhones were sold, driving Apple's revenue to $24 billion, a 24% increase from the previous year. But the true genius of the iPhone came in 2008 with the launch of the App Store. Jobs understood that opening the iPhone to third-party developers would turn it into more than just a device. It would become a platform. Within its first weekend, 10 million apps were downloaded, and by the end of 2008, the App Store had generated $200 million. Jobs had just created an entire app economy that would fuel Apple's dominance for decades to come. Even as the global economy collapsed in 2008, sending Apple's stock price plunging by over 50%, Jobs never wavered. He streamlined operations, focused on lean inventory, and, most importantly, continued innovating. Instead of cutting back, he introduced the MacBook Air, pulling it out of a manila envelope on stage to showcase the future of ultra-thin laptops. Critics were skeptical, but by 2011, the MacBook Air became Apple's best-selling laptop, reshaping the industry once again. In 2010, Apple's momentum reached new heights with the launch of the iPad. Many dismissed it as just a big iPhone, but Jobs knew better. The iPad created a new category of personal computing, selling 300,000 units on day one and 14.8 million by the end of 2010. That year, Apple's annual revenue hit $65 billion. Through it all, Jobs never lost sight of his philosophy. Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. Steve Jobs wasn't just a CEO, he was a visionary. He saw what others couldn't. He built not just products, but ecosystems. He didn't follow trends, he created them. And in the process, he transformed Apple from a struggling company into the most valuable brand in the world. His relentless pursuit of excellence, His bold decision-making and his unparalleled ability to innovate ensured that Apple would outlive him and thrive. Jobs' legacy isn't just in the devices we use, it's in the way we live, work, and connect. Steve Jobs didn't just change Apple, he changed the world. Steve Jobs is celebrated as one of the greatest innovators of all time, but his journey was anything but perfect. His career was marked by significant failures. But he didn't just face failure, he embraced it, learned from it, and used it as fuel to create some of the most groundbreaking products in history. One of Jobs' earliest setbacks came in 1983 with the release of the Apple Lisa, a futuristic computer far ahead of its time. It introduced a graphical user interface, overlapping windows, and a mouse, revolutionary features that would later define modern computing. But there was one major problem: the price. At $9,995, it was simply too expensive for consumers. On top of that, it was slow, unreliable, and lacked software support. The result? Lisa flopped, selling fewer than 100,000 units and costing Apple millions. Lesson learned: pushing the boundaries of innovation isn't enough. Products must be practical, reliable, and accessible. Then, in 1993, Jobs attempted to merge computing and television with the Macintosh TV, a concept that was way ahead of its time. But with limited features, poor marketing, and sluggish performance, it failed spectacularly, selling fewer than 10,000 units before Apple pulled the plug. Jobs realized something crucial: even a great idea means nothing if it's not executed at the right time. And then, in 2000, there was the Power Mac G4 Cube, a computer so beautiful it earned a place in the Museum of Modern Art. Encased in clear acrylic, it was a design masterpiece. But design alone wasn't enough. At $1,799, it was overpriced, lacked expandability, and had overheating issues. Apple sold just 150,000 units before discontinuing it in 2001. The lesson? Aesthetic beauty must be balanced with functionality and practicality. What made Steve Jobs extraordinary wasn't that he never failed, it was that he never stopped learning from failure. He took these painful lessons and channeled them into his greatest successes. The iMac, where he combined bold design with consumer-friendly pricing to revive Apple. The iPod, which transformed how we consume music. The iPhone, which seamlessly blended design, functionality, and usability to redefine the smartphone industry. Jobs understood that failure wasn't a dead end, it was just a stepping stone. As he famously said, "Sometimes when you innovate, you make mistakes. It is best to admit them quickly and get on with improving your other innovations." But Jobs' biggest challenge wasn't a product failure, it was his own health. In 2004, he was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. For 7 years, he fought the illness while still leading Apple, unveiling products that shaped the world. In 2009, just weeks after a liver transplant, Jobs returned to work, refusing to slow down. Even as his health declined, he introduced the iPad in 2010, yet another game-changing innovation. But by August 2011, he knew it was time to step down. Naming Tim Cook as his successor, Jobs ensured Apple's future was secure. By the time he resigned, Apple had become one of the most valuable companies in history. On October 5, 2011, the world loses a visionary. Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world mourned the loss of a true pioneer. Tributes poured in from world leaders, tech giants, and millions of fans, recognizing the profound impact he had on technology, business, and culture. But his story didn't end there. Today, Apple is worth $3.46 trillion, a testament to Jobs' vision and relentless pursuit of excellence. But his impact goes far beyond financial success. He didn't just create products, he reshaped industries. He transformed culture. And he changed the way we live, work, and communicate. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Steve Jobs wasn't just the man who created Apple. He was the man who dared to reimagine the world. From a garage startup to the world's most valuable company, this is the story of the visionary who dared to think different and changed everything.